Hey, we're Aaron and Jennifer Smith with Marriage After God,
helping you cultivate an extraordinary marriage.
and today we're going to talk about how to have a healthy biblical relationship with your in-laws.
Well, thank you for joining us this week, and we just want to encourage you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. Also, hit that little bell so that you can receive notifications when we launch new episodes.
So since this week we're going to be talking about in-laws, I'm sure you're going to be having tons of comments and questions, so we just want to invite you to engage in the comments below. We love reading those. We actually get a lot of ideas for these videos from those comments. To start off today, I just want to explain that we understand that there's infinite number of relational variables that go into in-laws and your marriage, and so we just want to explain that we're not going to be discussing every single variation and every single variable.
There wouldn't be enough
and
time.
all the situations that are going on. That it's just not possible. We actually don't have experience with every single one, so we're just going to talk on a normal, average level of what most marriages are dealing with most in-laws. And but the idea is that you should be able to take biblical principles and still apply them at every level.
Yeah.
But what we're going to be discussing is just the common relational situations that happen, and we're just going to talk about what the Bible talks about and how we should engage with our in-laws and the perspective we should have. So we just hope that this will give you a good perspective and good ideas on how to navigate. We've had a lot of people actually ask us specifically about this topic in the emails that we get, in the comments that we get, just asking us, how to navigate, my husband and his relationship with his parents, or, my wife and her relationship with her parents, and how that dynamic works in our marriage. And so we just hope to bring some light to it and in our own walk with our in-laws, and hopefully for you.
Yeah. So as we get started, I just wanted to point out that there are, just like you were mentioning, there's infinite number of scenarios or dynamics in those relationships. When we look at marriage, it's a husband and wife coming together who have very different backgrounds. And so those families that they're coming from are also going to have different types of backgrounds and cultures, like family cultures, things that they believe and ways that they live.
Ways that they raised you and your spouse, and the ways that they see the world. And
all of that plays a role in the way that you engage with one another. So marriage in itself can be a challenge in not only getting to know each other, but responding and receiving, that communication from one another. But then you have the extended family. And we just want to put out there, we know that it's messy. We know that relationships can have challenges and can be difficult.
Will have challenges.
Yeah. You always correct me on that it's always it's going to happen.
It's rare that we've met people that everything's perfect. We've never had issues on either side.
If you're dealing with human beings, there's going to be messiness, and that's okay. And so we first off just want to encourage you guys that this is a learning process, not only for you and your spouse, but also for each family. And so be willing to embrace it as a journey and to know that you're going to be growing alongside all of these people, and that's okay.
Yeah. As we move forward on this, there's going to be 3 areas that we think you should consider biblically and with a healthy mentality on how to engage and have a relationship with your in-laws, so that you don't feel crazy. But we want to start with the first verse today is going to be from Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. This goes all the way back to the beginning, right when God invented marriage and created it with Adam and Eve. And he says this in verse 24. He says, "Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Okay. And so we always talk about this in almost every episode. We talk about this idea of oneness, and it starts right when you're married, you leave the 2 family units and you become a new family unit. One unit. And so we want to talk about this. The first area is boundaries. You no longer are attached to your parents. You are now your own unit, single unit. Doesn't matter if you have kids or not. You're immediately one flesh and separate from the authority and the headship or whatever, that power that they would have in your life before you're married as a single person in your parents' home or as an individual in their home, and now you're one.
And now you're going to be building up your own family culture and your own ways of doing life together with your spouse.
Yeah. So we're just this idea of boundaries. Most of the issues that we've seen in people talking to us, the issues that we've had have been around the idea of boundaries.
Yeah.
Not having them, not knowing where to put them, just free for all. But if you want to have a healthy relationship with your marriage, if you want to have a marriage after God, you have to have boundaries. Mm-hmm. And what that means is there's known, again, on the same page. This isn't just, the wife making the boundaries for the husband's in-laws or parents, or the husband making boundaries for the wife's parents. There's a mutual understanding in our oneness of like, well, what kind of boundaries are going to set up? What issues have we seen? Where are we going to let our parents speak into our lives? Where are we going to let our parents have a hand in our lives? How much access do our parents have? Because that's another, how much access? Like, are they just, boom, they can come in, they don't have to knock. Mm-hmm. They can come in. Like, so what do those boundaries look like? And it really starts with communication, as we always say, between the husband and the wife, and saying, okay, what do we see and how are we going to set boundaries?
Yeah. And in most cases, I would say then the next step is to go together to those in-laws or parents and have a conversation with them about those boundaries and clearly communicate, with respect, why those boundaries are important to you and your spouse.
Yeah. And in love and in truth. And the purpose is not to, sever relational ties, but is to say, hey, we're trying to build something. We're trying to build our own family unit, and we have a way of looking at things. There are things that we're walking through, and we just want to make sure that where we stand on certain things.
And I think it's important for the parents to know that the husband and wife are on the same page, because they'll be able to sniff out if you're undivided. If you're not unified in whatever boundary you're trying to set, they'll realize that, and they'll take advantage of it in some cases.
With not necessarily with a bad heart. Like, our parents are parents, and it's actually hard for them to recognize that they're no longer in that role. Yeah. And so, like, if, let's say, your parents, I'm kind of like dropping the ball in some areas and they can see it. They can easily come in and be parents again and try and take up the slack in that. But that is actually really dangerous, because it's undermining me in the home. It could be making me feel really disrespected and dishonored. And so, not that they're trying to do that. They just really like, I want to protect my daughter. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is good to help them identify the husband and wife as a single unit, and to encourage leadership, or to encourage the different roles that they're trying to walk in.
Yeah. And if those boundaries don't get set, what you end up seeing happening is you see one, a mother and a father, or the mother-in-law and the father-in-law could become very overbearing, and all of a sudden it's another person in the marriage, another two people in the marriage, instead of it just being us. Yeah. And what we do is we make decisions as a couple, as one unit. And what we do is we go get advice from people. Instead of it being that way, now it's me, my wife, and her mom. Yeah. Or you, your husband, and his dad. And it's not just one flesh.
More opinions equals more conflict and more hardship.
But not just opinions, actually, like authority. Yeah. Like, because opinions are fine, but it's what kind of role does those outsiders play? And that brings me to this other understanding in boundaries, is recognizing that every single person, even your children, are outsiders looking into your marriage. Yeah. That doesn't mean that there's not wisdom and knowledge and understanding and giftings that you can glean from in your marriage. It doesn't mean you're autonomous and like, nope, no one can say anything. We have no relationship with anyone. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that the core of who we are is we are one flesh, and everyone else is looking in on the outside. They get to ask permission to give us advice. They get to come in and say, hey, I see some stuff. What do you think about this? Not, actually, why don't you step out of the way? Let me help you figure this out. Oh, why don't you, I'm going to take the role of your wife. If my mom stepped in and said like, oh, your wife's not like fulfilling her role, let me do it for you because I want to make sure you're taken care of. Right. It's very unhealthy. If anyone in the world has that kind of like getting between our oneness, it usually happens with our in-laws.
So early on in our marriage, I just really wanted to share this story, especially for those who may be listening that are newlyweds or in those first couple years. But this could be encouraging for anyone to hear. I really wrestled with seeing myself separated from my family and clinging to my husband. So that one flesh action happening. And I just remember really desiring to still be a part of my family and almost live as if nothing had changed. Yet I was married. And so that was a struggle in my own heart. And I remember... Well,
it was also we were like right in the midst of a lot of our hardships early on in our marriage. Yeah. And you saw it as like, I was comfortable there.
Right.
This is hard.
Yeah. So just being comfortable in marriage, that was really hard for me. But I remember specifically we were doing missions, and we had traveled from California, where we were born and raised, and we were living in Florida now. And this was within the first 2 years of our marriage. And I woke up from a dream where I saw the United States, and I was standing in Florida.
Oh yeah, I forgot this.
I was standing in Florida with an umbilical cord still attached to my stomach, and the cord running all the way back to California. And I woke up from the dream, and I just felt like God was telling me, like, you need to let go. You need to sever not your relationship, with your parents or your family, but you need to let go that emotional tie of, like, they're no longer responsible for you, but your husband is. And so I remember telling you this, and what did you think?
It was pretty profound. Like, I mean, if you think about it, everyone's probably like, oh my gosh, like, I get that. Like, you still felt like, hey, I'm not getting what I think I need to get here in my marriage, or this is too hard. And you felt yourself, and you had a very little, like, you would cry sometimes, like, I just want to go home.
Yeah, I asked to go home all the time. And I don't even think I realized how bad I was struggling with this separation of my family until I saw this picture, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a grown adult with this cord still attached to me, and I need to just be able to cut that off, to become one flesh with you, but then to understand how my relationship will mature with my family and how it will grow from there.
Yeah, well, because it becomes a new relationship. You were once now a daughter, and now you're married and a wife,
right?
And you have a mother that you can interact with on another level,
different level. Yeah.
So that you had to set a boundary for yourself
in my own
heart. And also, it was good because you told me, and it helped me know how to encourage you, and say, like, hey, I know that you miss your mom, but we are a family now, and I'm going to be here. I'm not going anywhere. And it's still a learning process all the time. But it wasn't until we started setting boundaries with both of our parents, both our in-laws, that we actually started getting, like, it felt much more healthy. We're like, man, there's some boundaries that need to be set. Well,
our perspective of each other became more healthy. That we in marriage are, a family.
Yeah, and that other people don't get to just, like my mom doesn't, and my dad don't just have some inherent authority in our marriage. They're just like an individual that's outside of our marriage, like anyone else, and they can speak into it, and they can give light, and they can give wisdom, but they don't have an inherent authority. Just with your parents, they don't have an inherent authority. But if you don't set those boundaries, what usually happens is they think they have that.
Well, and if somebody does try to exercise that authority outside of the marriage, what happens is either the husband or the wife can become influenced by that, and then all of a sudden there's division.
Usually influenced.
Yeah.
We've experienced this. We're not going to give any specific details, but in both sides of this, where, an in-law influenced who we were and how we were being towards our spouse. And again, our parents weren't doing it to be malicious or to hurt us. They're just trying to help. They love us. They love us as their children, and they have motherly and fatherly instincts still. Yeah. But if we don't set the boundaries, they'll never see us as individual adults. Yeah. They'll never see us as a single unit. They'll never respect us equally, which leads me to another point. Is we've heard too many stories of the husband being so still attached to mom, and the mom acting as if, how the wife should be acting, and the wife feels totally dishonored, totally disrespected, totally irrelevant, and it's super unhealthy. And again, I don't think the mom's doing it on purpose. In some situations that they are, but it definitely doesn't build unity in the marriage. And the wife's like, what do? I feel like he'd rather listen to his mom than me. And we've seen it on the other side. You felt connected to your mom, but we've seen wives connected to their fathers, and well, I'm going to listen to my dad over you. Yeah. And now the father's the authority in the home, not the husband.
Or something as simple as they need something fixed around the house or something, and the first person that they constantly go to is the dad, and not relying on the husband to fix things or to help play that father role in the marriage.
Well, and the husband, the leadership role that we actually get to navigate that. And let's say the husband doesn't know how to do those things. How is he ever going to learn if the wife doesn't say, hey, let's figure this out? Yeah. My dad would usually do it, but I want to go to you. How can we do this? So not running to our parents, because that encourages them saying like, oh, I'm needed, and now I'm gonna step in. Now that doesn't mean we can't go to our parents if we need their help. But again, we have to be on the same page. Right. We are one flesh, and again, that's inviting them in not them taking,
right.
Authority where it's not given.
So again, this first area that we wanted to cover was just boundaries. And going back to that first verse that you read about in Genesis, I mean, it's mentioned over and over again in the Bible. It's mentioned in Ephesians 5:31, Matthew 19:5, Mark 10. And it's this idea that the husband and wife are supposed to leave their families and cleave to each other. Yeah. And the most important reason for setting these boundaries is to protect the marriage. And so we just wanted to encourage you guys to be evaluating your marriage, setting those boundaries, communicating about them, and then going to the in-laws, going to the parents and saying, hey, this is what we've agreed upon, and let them know that you are unified in these boundaries.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that you don't love them setting boundaries. It just means that you do, and that you're giving them criteria on how that they're going to engage with the new family unit. So the next section I want to go into, and this is going to be one that kind of covers a lot of things, just all the different relational statuses that marriages might have with their in-laws. But it's to be Christ-like. We are called to be examples. So if you want to be a marriage after God, we're going to be like Christ in our in-laws' life. You might have in-laws that are not believers. You might have in-laws that are believers, but no matter what, we're called to be Christ-like, that we are an example to them, that even if we'd set boundaries with them, that we're doing it in truth and in love. And that our whole heart for them is that they grow in maturity, that they grow in understanding, that they have healthy relationship with you and eventually your children as grandparents, right? So, that we can have a Christ-like relationship with them, that we have kindness towards them, that we have love towards them, that we have patience towards them, because we're the Christians and we have a marriage after God, and we're trying to walk with them like we would walk with anyone.
Yeah, I think sometimes it can be easier to think about that stranger down the street or that barista at the coffee shop, and your role in their life is to be that light and to be that person who reflects Christ to them and to be kind towards them. But then you consider family and you go, oh, well, they can handle it because they're not going anywhere. And sometimes that can be, always that can be a destructive perspective to have. And we can find ourselves complaining about our in-laws. We can find ourselves having a poor attitude towards them
and perspective of them.
So I would just encourage you guys to be mindful of your heart towards your in-laws and know that they're no different than the stranger down the street, your neighbor, your spouse. Like, they are important people. God loves them. God wants their hearts to be directed towards him, and he may he will definitely use you to be that light in their lives. Well,
and that's the other thing is, if you aren't a light in their lives, let's say you have, family that are unbelievers, or if you have family that are just immature believers, are you afraid to be a light in their life? And you're like, oh, I'm not going to say anything to them because it's always a fight. I'm not going to, I don't want to have that argument again. Oh, I don't want to bring up God because, every single time it's blah, 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 blah. Right? If you're being influenced more by them than you are influencing them, that's dangerous. Are you a light in their life? Are you who you are at home with them? Are you who you are at work with them? So not allowing who they are, unless they're just godly and mature and you're looking up to them, because you should be influenced by them. You should follow their example. But if they're not, you be a light to them. And you don't let how they are and the things they love to do, because to be honest, if they do, if you go over there and they do things that you don't want your kids around, or you don't want to be around because you are a believer, maybe you shouldn't be around them in that situation. So not letting your witness and your light and your Christ-likeness change around your in-laws.
And this can be a really hard one, especially for women, I think, because we are so, we can be so emotional and sensitive. But you encouraged me a while back with a family member that I didn't feel really loved or that they wanted to be around me. And you just told me you can't let how they respond to you affect the way that you respond to them. You were still called to love them and cherish them and respect them.
And it actually helped you not feel so burdened by it.
Because I was wrestling with some insecurities in that relationship, and it just helped me see them as Christ sees them, and to be mindful that my love doesn't change. I still love them, and every opportunity that I have to hang out with them, I do take that, and it has made the relationship itself more healthy. So not to let other people people's responses, especially family members, affect you to the point where you're ineffective in their lives, because you can still be effective. You can still love them. You can still show them the light of Christ. And I think that was a huge encouragement for me towards some family members. So
the next thing I want to talk about, being Christ-like, leads us into our next section, which is going to be responsibility. And being Christ-like, Christ prayed for us in John 17, the high priestly prayer. We should be praying for our in-laws. Just always, whether they know God or not, we should be praying for them. If they don't know the Lord, we should be praying that God gets a hold of their hearts. If they do know the Lord, we should be praying that they get mature and that God, takes care of them, that they lean on Him for everything. And so that we have a heart of prayer. And under the responsibility section, I feel like just like with anyone, we should be, one of our responsibilities is prayer. For our in-laws.
Absolutely. And I think we should also be praying about, our spouse's relationship with their parents or their in-laws, which would be your parents. And so just making sure that you are just entering into God's throne room with a heart of humility, wanting to preserve all those relationships and making sure that
to the best of your ability,
that God's will is being done in them.
And so that under this responsibility section, there's a scripture I want to read in 1 Timothy that gives us a pretty stark perspective on like how we should see our in-laws. And again, not every single relationship is going to fall perfectly in every category. So we want to explain that you use wisdom and you walk in discernment in these relationships. And if that relationship with an in-law is dangerous, you need to be careful. You need to get godly counsel on how to deal with that relationship. But again, for the most part, what this is going to say in 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8 is this. It says, "But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." And so what this is saying is, first of all, it's when it says especially his own household, this relationship, the oneness with each other and our relationship with our children, our own household, comes first. And foremost, the health. I'm not going to sacrifice the health, the spiritual welfare, the financial welfare. I'm not going to put my family in danger to take care of someone else. So it needs to go in order that okay, is my family okay? Oh, cool. We are. So we can actually, as a family, we can take care of the needs of our relatives. And the idea of relatives is saying if you have, if your father's dying, do you take care of them? Are you there for them? If your mother is sick or if they're in a massive financial burden, are you able to help if you can? Not just, no, they're on their own. I have no responsibility. It doesn't work that way. So again, for the most part, in most situations, the idea is that we have a heart of care for our relatives.
I'd also like to encourage everyone that, a husband and wife moving forward in their relationship with their in-laws, as far as taking care of relatives, they should be unified in that too. I think it's really important that they're actively communicating, hey, how are we going to be able to support so-and-so? And not just, one spouse taking the lead or control in that area saying, no, it doesn't matter how much it takes, we're doing this.
I think very considerate.
I think it's important to communicate your feelings and how driven you are to be able to support or help or encourage your relatives. But if the means aren't there to do it, or if maybe your spouse comes in with a different perspective, I think it's important to just to listen to each other and to walk with each other in an understanding way when it comes to relatives outside of your own household.
Well, and you can have one, I could be super partial to my parents and not even consider yours or vice versa. And so having a singular mentality on how we are going to help our relatives as needed. Again, there's an infinite number of, scenarios that's going to be played out in your life. But as we always talk about, go to the Word of God, go to prayer, get godly counsel in any situation. Don't just someone needs, $1,000 they need to borrow $1,000. Boom, here you go. It's not what this is talking about. It's just saying it says provide for his relatives, as in, are they in actual need? Not they could actually go get a job and figure it out. If one's a widow or a widower, that you consider their situation, you consider how your family can participate in helping them, that you're available if needed. But you don't just
do it.
You do it with wisdom and in discernment and in agreement. But it does, the Bible does tell us that we should have a mind and a heart that is willing to provide for our in-laws, provide for it says relatives. So I don't know how far that goes. Again, that's going to be different in every scenario, but just have like going to the Christ-like and going to the boundaries, like it's all encompassing that we do care and we want to participate, and we don't want to just cut people off in our lives, which again, that might be necessary. That might be the way you need to help someone, is like, actually, no, you're dangerous or you're unhealthy. But not just willing to do that because they bother us or because it's hard and sticky. So again, wisdom, discernment in every area, but that we would set boundaries in our marriage, knowing that we are one and that everyone else is on the outside looking in. That we are to be Christ-like, not just in our neighbors' lives, but in our relatives' lives and our in-laws' lives, that we are to be an example to them and not let their life influence us unless their life is a good influence, if that makes sense. And then, the responsibility that we have to be praying for them and to honor them, because the Bible tells us in the fifth commandment it says, honor your parents, right? And then what's the scripture?
It's in Ephesians.
Yeah, in Ephesians 6:1. Says it this way, just so you can get the next level of this. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. So when you're out of the home, again with the boundaries, you're no longer responsible for obeying your parents as if you were still under their roofs. But we are totally required to still honor our parents, just like we're supposed to honor the elders, elderly, like older people, because they're wiser, they're older. We're still respectful and honoring them. Doesn't mean what they say goes. What that means is in how we respond to them, how we interact with them is with honor. It's like, hey, you are my parents. I love you and I'm going to honor you, but I'm going to, gracefully disagree. Or I'm going to say, actually, that goes beyond our boundaries and, we love you, but you need to make sure you stay within these confines. You could do that with respect. You can do that with honor. You don't have to be disrespectful and cut them off and be mean, and Christ wouldn't do that. So, the responsibilities we have is to pray for them, to provide for them if necessary, and to honor them. Not necessarily obey, but honor.
So those are the three areas that we just thought, like, no matter what the dynamics are in anyone's family, these are three areas that you can evaluate, talk about, and set for your family in regards to your extended family. So again, setting boundaries, being Christ-like, no matter what, and just the responsibility that you do have in those other people's lives. And so we just wanted to encourage you guys today. We hope that this episode would just get you and your spouse on the same page when it does come to in-laws. And if there is contention there, if there is conflict, if there is a disagreement, that you guys would just move forward, submitting it all to God and allowing Him to shape your hearts and perspectives in regards to in-laws and your relationship with them.
So thank you for joining us this week. We hope this episode encouraged you and gave you some talking points, as Jennifer said, and we just look forward to having you next week. Did you enjoy today's show? Find many more encouraging stories and resources at marriageaftergod.com, and let us help you cultivate an extraordinary marriage.